Welcome to equivalent fractions, identifying equivalent fractions with the same numerator or denominator. Our lesson objective is to develop understanding of equivalent fractions and how to be able to find one or more equivalent fraction using the number line. To review some information that we are familiar with, just a good review. A numerator is the top number in a fraction that shows the number of equal parts counted. The denominator is the bottom number in a fraction that shows the total number of equal parts in the whole. Now, these are some new terms that we are going to be discussing, some new vocabulary: equivalence, chain, equivalent, and equivalent fractions. First of all, an equivalence chain is a series of equivalent fractions connected with an equal sign. These are all fractions that are equal value. For example, we have 1/2 is equal to 2/4, which is equal to 4/8, which is equal to 8/16. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that, but I want you to ponder and think about what those all have in common. Now, equivalent is just simply identifying things that are equal. They have the same amount, same value. Equivalent fractions are fractions that name the same amount. So, for example, 1/2 is equal and is equivalent to that of 2/4. Now let's look at another using the bar. We have 1/2 here. We have 2/4 here. Remember that we identified that 1/2 is equal to 2/4. In addition, 1/2 is equal to 4/8. And in addition, 1/2 is equal to 6/12. Those are equivalent fractions because they each have the same value. Let's look at equivalent fractions in this particular demonstration. We have 1/2 and 1/2, which these are all equal to a whole. We have one strip divided into halves, one strip divided into 4/4, and one strip divided into 8/8. It says over here, use the halves, fourths, and 8 strips to answer the question and complete the equation. It says, how many 8s are in 1/4? I want you to look at the strips. Here is our 1/4, and here we have just below it 8s. How many are equal to the 4th? Well, just by using our visual on our bar, we can tell that 2/8 is equal to 1/4. Our answer is, how many 8s are in 1/4? It is 2/8. Let's answer this question. 2/8. Our second question says, so we would answer 2/8 is equal to, 2/8 is equal to 1/4. Now let's check our answer here. We would put 2. Now let's check. We are correct. 2/8 is equal to 1/4. Very good. Now, I want you to consider our poor puzzled penguin. He said, today my teacher asked me to name a fraction that is equivalent to 1/2. I wrote 2/6 is equal to 1/2. Think about this. and see if you can answer the puzzle penguin. Is 2/6 equal to 1/2? Now, we already discussed an equivalent fraction is two fractions that name the same part of a whole. So we again are going to identify by comparing fractions which ones are equal and what is required to make them equal. How many parts or unit fractions. In addition, we're going to look at thirds and sixths, and we'll answer the question for our friend, the puzzle penguin. Now, I want you to move with me to solve this question. It says, use what you have learned about equivalent fractions and about comparing fractions. So this is a question for us. Jaime has half a dozen red marbles and 4/8 dozen green marbles. Does he have more red or green marbles? Think for just a minute what we know now of equivalent fractions. Do you think that half is greater than, equal to, or less than 4/8? Think about that, and we will be talking about this in more detail. Again, here's another question. It says, solve, use what you have learned about equivalent fractions and about comparing fractions. It says Nancy buys 3/6 pounds of walnuts. Sandra buys 3/4 pounds of almonds. Who buys more nuts? Thinking about what we know about the denominator and the numerator, 3/6, is that equal to, greater than, or less than 3/4? We could simply draw a bar. We could use some fraction circles. But remember what we know about the numerator and the denominator. The denominator identifies how many parts of the whole it is divided into, and the numerator identifies how many parts are present. If you think about this, you will know that 3/4 is greater than 3/6, which 3/6 is equal to half, and 3/4 is greater than half. So Sandra buys more nuts. Let's look at this equivalence chain. First of all, we have a half here. Let's look at what fractions are equal to half. We have 2/4, 3/6, 4/8, 5/10, 6/12, and 7/14. What is the pattern that you see with each of these fractions? Do you see a pattern? I'd like you to consider that the numerator in each of these fractions is half of the denominator. Does that help you see our pattern here? Assignments that you will be presenting this week and completing to utilize the skills of comparing and identifying equivalent fractions. First, you will identify equal fractions on a number line. Then you will use equivalence chains to identify fractions that are equal to other fractions. The two assessments that you should be able to do at the conclusion of our practice is you should be able to explain how using fraction strips can help you to find equivalent fractions by demonstrating that two fractions with different numerators and denominators can name the same amount. And second, you'll be able to explain and demonstrate examples of how to find equivalent fractions using the number line. We will demonstrate these. I want you to be familiar with these tools and information so that as we practice, you will be able to understand and compare equivalent fractions and understand how to identify an equivalent fraction. Good luck, and we will talk about this in the morning. Have a good evening.